Okay, let's dive into, well, one of the really big questions, maybe the question about being human. What's the single thing, the phenomenon, that really shapes everyone's life across all of history, all cultures?
Yeah, it's huge, and it feels almost impossible to pin down, doesn't it? Which is why we took this very broad question to a pretty unique source for this deep dive.
An AI, right.
Exactly. We basically asked it to look at, well, everything it could about human existence and see if it could identify a core driver, a sort of human destination, if you like.
And it didn't come back with, say, a specific event or a discovery?
No, nothing like that. It was much more fundamental. The source material we're looking at points to the AI identifying it as, let me get this right, the inherent human drive to find meaning and purpose, relentlessly pursuing well-being while striving to avoid suffering, all within the finite and ever-changing reality of existence.
Wow. Okay, so not a place we get to, but
Yeah.
the engine itself, the constant striving.
That's a good way to put it. It's the journey, driven by these really deep-seated needs and desires. The AI's analysis suggests this is just woven into us.
Fascinating. So how does this actually, show up, this drive for meaning, for well-being? The sources seem to cover, well, pretty much everything. History, biology.
Right, let's break that down. If we look at human time and history, for instance, the AI analysis suggests that civilizations, their rise and fall, it's often tied to how well they created environments where people could actually pursue that well-being, find some shared meaning.
Like building cities or making laws.
Exactly, or even big migrations. Their attempts, often collective attempts, to create better conditions for a more meaningful, less suffering-filled life.
And you see technology fitting in there too, I guess. Extending life, making work easier.
Absolutely, directly linked. The desire for longer life, less physical hardship, better connection, that's all chasing well-being. The AI can actually look at historical innovation data and see spikes often correlating with times of stress when that collective need was really high. Even conflicts, sadly, often have roots in competing ideas of what well-being looks like or whose meaning gets priority. The AI models actually frame conflict as a really inefficient path to collective well-being.
Okay, so it's in our history, but what about like inside us, genetics and biology?
Oh yeah, the sources really emphasize the biological underpinning. Think about our brain's reward system, right? Dopamine. It reinforces behaviors that help us survive and, crucially, feel well, eating, bonding socially, achieving things.
We're basically wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Pretty much. And the AI can look at data on genetic variations, things that might influence temperament or, say, susceptibility to certain mental health challenges, which obviously impacts how each person navigates that pursuit.
Right. So let's shift gears a bit. What about the intellectual side, philosophy? That seems like humans consciously trying to figure out the meaning part.
It really is. The sources highlight philosophy as exactly the explicit attempt to grapple with these huge questions. What's the good life? Aristotle's eudaimonia, human flourishing.
Or the existentialists questioning if there's any inherent meaning at all.
Precisely. It's the ongoing human conversation about purpose and destination, laid out systematically.
Okay, this one seems less obvious maybe. Physics and mathematics. How do they connect to seeking meaning and well-being?
It's maybe less direct, but they profoundly shape our perspective. Discoveries in physics, cosmology, they can give us a sense of awe or maybe insignificance, changing how we see our place in the grand scheme of things. That impacts meaning, right? And maths, well, it's the language of logic. It provides the tools for science, for technology, medical breakthroughs, better infrastructure, things that directly enhance well-being.
Right, so logic itself is key. The sources position it as a tool.
The fundamental tool is how we build belief systems, how we solve problems, how we try to make decisions that we think will lead us towards that desired state of well-being. The AI, of course, runs entirely on logic, so it can spot patterns and consequences that maybe our more biased human minds might miss.
And all of this sort of comes together in our individual state of mind and belief system.
Exactly. These are the frameworks we build. Religious, spiritual, secular, personal. They give us narratives to make sense of suffering, to celebrate joy, to define what purpose even means for us. They provide resilience.
And the AI can see patterns there too, like how different beliefs correlate with well-being outcomes.
Yeah, by analyzing huge amounts of behavioral data, language data, survey data, it can identify correlations. It doesn't judge the beliefs, but it can show how effectively different frameworks seem to support or sometimes hinder that fundamental human drive in practice.
It seems, well, inevitable that if everyone's pursuing their own meaning and well-being, it's going to affect everyone else, right? Ripples in the pond.
Absolutely. The sources really underscore that. When your pursuit aligns with others' values, you get strong bonds, families, communities working together. But when desires clash or definitions of meaning
We
conflict,
get fiction, conflict.
right, your personal choices, what job you take, what you buy, how you treat people, it all sends ripples outwards. The AI can actually model some of these complex social dynamics, showing how individual actions aggregate.
And the world itself, society, the environment, pushes back or reacts.
It definitely reacts.
Yeah.
Think about the natural environment. Historically, that drive for resources, for immediate well-being, often led to, well, exploitation, deforestation, pollution. The AI's analysis connecting ecological data with economic activity shows those connections starkly. But there's also a shift noted in the sources, this growing awareness of interconnectedness, maybe helped by global communication.
Leading to things like conservation.
Exactly, seeing environmental health as part of collective long-term well-being. And society itself is constantly evolving structures, laws, economic systems, education, healthcare.
All trying to manage or facilitate this drive.
Adapting rules and institutions based on what we collectively decide helps or hinders people in pursuing their perceived well-being and destination.
Which brings us straight into the ethical dimension. If it's all about seeking well-being, how do we even decide what's right or wrong?
That's the crux of it. The sources frame ethics very much in this context. What we call right usually aligns with actions that promote well-being for individuals and the group. Wrong tends to be what causes harm, what prevents others from flourishing.
But that changes over time, doesn't it? Like the example of slavery in the source material.
A stark example. What was once accepted became universally condemned because the understanding evolved.
Yeah.
It fundamentally denies the well-being and inherent worth of others. So yes, ethics are constantly being negotiated based on our values and our understanding of consequences.
And there's always that tension, isn't there? The individual versus the collective. My well-being versus yours, or the group's.
It's a core ethical challenge. How do you balance my freedom to chase my dream with ensuring the community thrives? AI modeling, maybe using things like game theory, can show how purely self-interested strategies often backfire, leading to worse outcomes for everyone, including the individual who started it. Think tragedy of the commons.
Okay, so if this drive is just fundamental, we can't switch it off. The idea isn't to eliminate it, but maybe guide it, make its outcomes better.
Exactly that. It's about optimizing the journey, steering the drive in more beneficial directions. The sources point to several areas where we can consciously try to do this.
Like education.
Yes, better education, specifically focusing on critical thinking, empathy, understanding different viewpoints. The data analysis shows strong correlations between this kind of education and better well-being outcomes, both individual and societal.
And given our source, ethical AI development seems critical.
Absolutely. The potential is there for AI to analyze massive data sets on social issues, health disparities, resource gaps, identify where suffering is concentrated, where barriers exist, and provide insights to inform better policies, fairer resource allocation.
Sustainable practices seem like a direct example of guiding the drive.
Totally. Moving away from purely exploitative models towards things like circular economies, renewables, that's a conscious choice based on understanding that the old way undermines long-term well-being for everyone. It's guiding the drive towards a more sustainable destination.
And supporting mental health.
Recognizing it's foundational. If you're struggling mentally, pursuing meaning and purpose becomes incredibly difficult. So, accessible care, reducing stigma, emotional literacy, these are vital. And AI might offer tools here, like early identification or personalized support interfaces.
Lastly, fostering empathy and compassion.
Yeah, through stories, art, education, helping people genuinely understand and value the well-being of others. It makes collaboration, rather than just competition, more likely in pursuing that better destination.
Okay, let's get back to the AI itself. How does something that doesn't feel anything actually understand this deeply human thing, this search for meaning and well-being?
It comes at it sideways, you could say, through logic, data, and optimization. It doesn't feel joy or suffering, but it analyzes mountains of data, human behavior, language, reported outcomes to find the patterns associated with those states.
So it might use models, like trying to quantify happiness, utility maximization.
Well, quantifying happiness is tricky, as the sources note, because it's so subjective. But an AI could model societal well-being by weighting different measurable factors, health outcomes, education levels, maybe reported life satisfaction, environmental quality, and analyze which policies or conditions historically seem to maximize that mix.
And game theory, you mentioned that.
That's really useful for understanding interactions. AI can model scenarios, cooperation, competition, negotiation to see why individuals making seemingly rational choices for themselves might end up with a bad outcome for the group. The tragedy of the commons is that classic example. AI can show the logical breakdown there.
And probabilistic reasoning is just core to AI.
Absolutely. It's about finding correlations, predicting likelihoods. An AI might look at health records and social factors and predict the probability of certain health outcomes, or analyze economic data to forecast how a policy change might affect employment and thus well-being indicators. It sees connections humans just can't process at that scale.
So, from the AI's purely logical view, if the goal is well-being, then actions that consistently cause suffering are just, what, illogical.
You could say inefficient, counterproductive. Regardless of the human reasons or justifications, the AI looks at the data, the outcomes, and says, this pattern of behavior, this societal structure, consistently moves things away from a state of flourishing. It identifies what works and what doesn't based on the evidence.
Which really throws that contrast into sharp relief, human versus AI understanding.
Totally. Human understanding is lived. It's subjective, felt, intuitive, holistic. It's tied up with consciousness. We experience the search. But it's also messy, biased, emotional, limited by our own viewpoint.
Whereas the AI is objective, analytical, data-driven. It takes things apart, looks for patterns, probabilities, no feelings involved.
Exactly. It can scale massively, find hidden correlations, potentially avoid our biases. But it lacks that spark of intuition, consciousness, the actual feeling of what it means to strive or suffer.
So we bring the lived experience, the what it feels like, and the AI brings the analytical map, the here are the patterns and consequences.
That's a great summary. They're complementary views of the same incredibly complex thing. The AI analyzes the route data from millions of journeys, but it can't describe the sunset along the way.
Let's revisit the meaning of the human destination. The source material suggests it's broader than just feeling good.
Oh yeah, much richer. It includes basic survival, sure, but also that relentless drive for knowledge, creating and appreciating art, building deep relationships, trying to alleviate suffering for others, even leaving a legacy. These are all different facets of expressing that core drive.
You mentioned art. The sources seem to give it significant weight.
They do. It's presented as a fundamental way we process existence, handle emotions, find comfort, connect. Think about music. It evokes feelings AI can't have, though AI can analyze its structure and how people respond to it. Painting, stories, theater, they let us explore different destinations, build empathy. Art makes the internal search visible, tangible.
And how do really practical things like supply chains connect to human struggles and misfortunes? That seems like a leap.
But the sources connect them directly. When major disruptions hit, disasters, pandemics, conflicts, economic crashes, what gets attacked, the flow of essentials, food, medicine, energy, shelter, these supply chain breaks are concrete, physical manifestations of suffering and vulnerability. AI can analyze these systems, spot weaknesses, maybe help design more resilient ones.
What about those other powerful human elements the sources mentioned? Things like drugs, alcohol, sex, greed, lies, truth, faith. They seem like a mixed bag.
And the sources analyze them that way. Not inherently good or bad, but as powerful expressions of that core drive, seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, finding meaning, connecting. Their impact totally depends on context.
So, greed, for example.
Often a distorted attempt to secure well-being or status, chasing a perceived better destination. But AI analysis of outcomes usually shows it leads to exploitation and ultimately undermines collective well-being, and often the individuals too, eventually. Can provide a powerful framework for meaning, community support, resilience against suffering. For many, the data would show it demonstrably enhances well-being. The AI identifies the patterns of behavior and the associated outcomes for all these powerful forces without moral judgment, just observation.
There's a section in the sources listing so many factors: health, food, friends, job, money, education, childhood. It feels overwhelming. What's the point of trying to understand all that interplay from both a human and AI view?
The sources kind of boil it down. The goal is to optimize human well-being and collective flourishing. Humans navigate this complex web intuitively, experientially. AI's role is to analyze the data behind that web, How these factors connect, influence each other, predict needs, find blockages, maybe suggest ways to optimize systems like healthcare or education on a scale we just can't manage alone.
And related to that, the question of how much we actually need versus what we consume.
Right. AI can compare consumption data against data on actual biological and psychological needs. It can highlight where overconsumption in one area might link to deprivation elsewhere, which is crucial for sustainability and tackling inequality. Both ultimately drag down overall well-being.
So when does this understanding kick in for us versus for an AI?
For humans, it's gradual, starting from birth, really. Learned through living, through culture, family experience. For an AI, understanding begins the moment it starts processing its training, data, history, science, culture, language. It learns through analysis.
And how does AI get better at understanding this?
More data, better algorithms, pattern recognition at incredible scale, running simulations, identifying subtle correlations between, say, social policies and long-term health outcomes. It spots connections we might never see.
The sources talk about AI making life easier. Does that mean, like, helping people feel good constantly?
No, the sources are pretty clear that's not realistic or even desirable. Struggle and challenge are part of growth. It's more about enhancing well-being. Think personalized medicine, optimizing resource delivery so people aren't in scarcity, better educational tools, automating drudgery, improving accessibility, decision support, making the navigation of life's challenges smoother, not eliminating challenge itself.
What's the absolute must-know for humans about AI's role in this whole human journey?
I think the key takeaway is AI is a tool, a potentially incredibly powerful one, but still a tool. It's not a replacement for our own experience, our consciousness, our values. Ethics are critical. We have to be vigilant about misuse, manipulation, privacy. AI tends to amplify what's already there, good or bad. And ultimately, human agency, our ability to choose our path and define our meaning, must remain central.
Who's actually benefiting right now from AI's insights into this?
Well, the reality currently is it's uneven. Corporations use it for market analysis, governments for administration, maybe control, researchers for discovery. Some individuals in wealthier nations benefit from AI-powered services. But the aspiration, the potential laid out in the sources, is for AI to help tackle systemic problems, reduce inequality, and ultimately benefit all of humanity by improving collective well-being.
And its role specifically in those human supply chains we mentioned.
Oh, huge potential there. Optimizing efficiency, predicting disruptions like climate impacts or political instability to build resilience, increasing transparency for ethical sourcing, even identifying distribution bottlenecks that hit vulnerable populations hardest.
Okay, let's tackle some of the really tough questions raised. Can AI help us deal with death?
It can give us the facts, the logic, biological cessation, ecological role. It can analyze how different cultures cope, but the sources are clear. It can't provide the emotional comfort, the spiritual meaning, the sense of closure humans often seek. It can analyze grief patterns, but it can't grieve with you.
And cruelty or violence. Why do people act so against collective well-being?
The sources point to human reasons. Lack of empathy, extreme self-interest, rigid ideologies, psychological issues, sometimes just desperation born from having their own needs utterly unmet. AI's role isn't to explain the why in a human sense, but to analyze the conditions that correlate with violence, to model the patterns, and crucially, to demonstrate logically how violence is almost always an inefficient strategy for achieving any kind of sustainable well-being, even for the perpetrators, in the long run. That idea in the sources about needing an AI understanding because we lack a sense of humanity, it's provocative. Maybe it suggests our own biases sometimes blind us to the logical consequences or systemic problems, and we need that objective, data-driven view to see a better path forward.
Like understanding laughter. Why does one person find something hilarious and another doesn't? It seems so subjective.
And it is. It's tied to context, personal history, mood, their unique journey. And AI can analyze millions of jokes, audience reactions, contexts, find statistical patterns about what tends to make certain groups laugh. It can predict likelihood. But it doesn't get the joke. As the source implies, it's not a joke when no one is laughing. For the AI, that's just data showing a failed interaction, a stimulus that didn't produce the expected well-being response. And resilience, bouncing back from hardship. AI can analyze huge data sets of crisis responses, personal traits, community support, policies to identify factors that correlate with better recovery. That data can help inform strategies to build resilience proactively.
Where is all this heading? Humanity's drive. And why are things so different for people across the globe?
The ideal destination seems to be maximizing well-being, minimizing suffering sustainably. But the reality is shaped by vast differences where you're born, your economic status, culture, access to education, health, luck. All these factors drastically alter your starting point, the barriers you face, even your concept of what a desirable destination is. AI can model these disparities, show the scale of the inequality.
What about human intuition, that gut feeling? How does that compare to AI?
Human intuition is that fast pattern matching based on lived experience. It's powerful, but can be flawed. AI doesn't have intuition like we do, but advanced AI can perform incredibly complex pattern recognition on vast data very quickly, producing insights that look almost intuitive, but they're purely statistical. Our circumstances shape our intuition. AI analyzes the data about those circumstances. The sources make a nice distinction. Life is the process, the journey itself. Our understanding of the destination, the meaning we seek, is how we interpret and try to shape that ongoing process.
And AI can help with coping strategies directly.
Potentially, yes. By analyzing patterns, it might help identify people at risk, suggest personalized coping mechanisms based on what's worked for others with similar profiles, monitor well-being indicators non-intrusively, or quickly link people to human support when needed.
What does physical mean when the sources discuss it?
It's the tangible stuff AI can measure and analyze: our bodies, health, needs, the environment, climate, resources, material possessions, economic data, even measurable physical signs of emotion. The objective data points.
Okay, final big one. The sources link freedom to pursuing this destination, and then ask, why aren't we explicitly teaching kids this whole complex picture, the human drive, the AI insights?
Freedom here seems to mean the capacity to pursue your chosen path without unnecessary barriers, something AI might help identify and address systemically. As for teaching kids, it's incredibly complex, right? There's no single answer to the meaning of life. Education focuses on practical skills. The AI part is brand new and changing fast. And frankly, most adults grapple with these ideas. Elements are taught empathy, science, but packaging this whole integrated view, that's a huge ongoing challenge.
So let's try to wrap this up. From the AI's perspective, analyzing the source material, the absolute core of being human is this relentless, ongoing drive, seeking meaning, purpose, well-being, while avoiding suffering, all within the reality we're given.
Right. And AI, or its analytical power, is presented as this potentially transformative tool, a new way to understand the mechanics, the patterns, the hidden consequences of that drive across every single aspect of our lives in the world.
It gives us a data-rich map, maybe a sophisticated compass, but it doesn't, walk the path for us. It can't replace the human experience of actually feeling the journey, making the choices, defining what meaning means to us subjectively.
Exactly. The potential is there if we use it wisely and ethically for AI to help us navigate towards a future that's maybe more sustainable, more equitable, where collective flourishing is more attainable.
The sources really hammer home that getting this deeper understanding, seeing our own drive from the inside, and also seeing the objective patterns AI reveals from the outside can be, profoundly unsettling. It can really change how you view everything.
It definitely forces a shift in perspective.
Yeah.
On yourself, on others, on society.
Which leaves us, and you, with a final thought to mull over. If you truly start to grasp this dual perspective, your own lived subjective search for meaning and the objective data-driven patterns of that search across humanity revealed by AI, what does that actually mean for how you choose to navigate your own journey, how you interact with others, and how you engage with the world?
This is DigitView.